start the night off by sharing some amazing patient stories. We're all here because we're interested in cardiogenic shock. We all work at different aspects of it, but we're here united because of the patients that we get to treat. And I'd like to introduce Miss King. She's here with her family, all right? And she's gonna tell you a wonderful story. And I'm just gonna briefly frame it, not to take anything away from her, but so we have the medical context. So Miss King was traveling, she'll tell you where, and to celebrate being pregnant. And on that trip, unfortunately, she had an LAD STEMI that was unable to be fixed with stenting and PCI. She was transferred transcontinentally back to us, where we stabilized her. We were able to manage her medically. However, she was early enough in her pregnancy that she was recommended to terminate because of the advancement of her heart failure and how early she was. After many, many discussions, we decided that we were going to try to treat her as long as possible. She ended up getting an Impella 5.5 after crashing on ECMO in the OR. She was weaned off of that ECMO at the same operative time, and she was managed on that Impella 5.5 until she was safe to deliver, and she had an Impella-supported cesarean section. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Persephone and Cassandra.
As Dr. Wilson was kind enough to say, my name is Cassandra King. This is my beautiful daughter. So yes, for those in a grim profession, we have a very happy ending to our story. I'm a graduate of Hollins University. I graduated summa cum laude as a double major in economics and business with a concentration in finance. I'm the winner of the Elizabeth Kennedy Chance Award for Excellence in Economics, and I hold master's degrees from Virginia Tech in accounting and information systems. Before I share the thrilling and arduous tale of my perilous journey to motherhood, I'd like to thank some people. I'd like to thank Dr. Rajkumar. She was my anesthesiologist, for her bravery and out-of-the-box thinking. And I'd like to thank Dr. Milski, who is a very gifted cardiothoracic surgeon. He's the man, as he said, who got me on ECMO and then placed the Impella pump in my heart. I'd like to thank Dr. Malloy, my father, and Bowman Gray graduate. He's a graduate of the Bowman Gray School of Medicine, class of '85, and winner of the NEJ Covington Award for excellent cardiac anesthesia for his contributions to the plan that saved my life. And that plan was, as he said, the extending gestation to viability, which is what we use the pump for, which is apparently very unusual. And then I'd also like to thank my husband, Adam King, because he managed to get me out of Jamaica and was with me every step of the way. So those are the 4 people that I credit the most with saving my life, but I'd also like to say that the CICU team and the NICU team were just absolutely phenomenal. The nurses, the nursing assistants, the care and compassion that I received there is unmatched. They were absolutely phenomenal. I don't know that I could have received better care anywhere else in the world. And so, now to my thrilling tale. When I was 32 years old, my husband and I decided that we wanted to expand our family. And it took us longer than we expected, but when I was 35 years old, on August 3rd, 2024, Dr. Hirsch confirmed that I was pregnant with a viable baby. And as Dr. Milski mentioned, we wanted to go on a baby moon to celebrate the close of this chapter of our life and celebrate the new one that we were about to embark upon. We had a nice time in Jamaica. We picked that because we'd never been there before. It was nice. I sat on the beach and sipped virgin cocktails while my husband was allowed to enjoy the real thing. On the last night there, it rained. This didn't really concern me because we were leaving the next day. But the reason that it rained was because a hurricane was about to make landfall on the other side of the island. After a lovely dinner, my husband and I went back to our room. We were going to watch a movie. And I was sitting down on the couch when I developed absolutely debilitating back pain. I mean, it was absolutely awful. To my husband and my credit, I think we sought help pretty quickly. After about 2 hours, the pain was not getting better, it was getting worse. It was now in my chest and radiating down my left arm. But considering I was only 35 years old and had no history of, heart disease in my family or anything like that, heart attack wasn't really on our radar. But we called the nurse, who promptly called a doctor, who promptly called an ambulance. I remember walking down from our room in a haze of pain and getting into the ambulance to go to the Jamaican ER, which if you have a chance to do, I don't recommend. Jamaican medicine is a little bit different than it is here. In this country, you can walk into any ER you need to, and they will treat you regardless of your ability to pay. That is not how it is in Jamaica. You have to pay first, or they will not treat you. So my husband had to deal with that, and they summoned a cardiologist, who promptly told my husband, "I don't want her to die here." She recommended that I have an angiogram, and I will say, for Jamaica, I received pretty decent care. I'm not convinced that they would have done that much more other than manage my pain better had I been in the States. So she wanted to do an angiogram. There's only one problem. The hospital that I'm at is not equipped to do one. And there is a hospital on the island that can. It's 3 hours away in Kingston, on the other side of the island, where a hurricane is now making landfall. So the cardiologist and my husband and I were loaded into an ambulance, and off we went, 3 hours away, into a hurricane. Before they did the angiogram, they wanted to do an ultrasound of my heart, and I remember pleading with the tech to please tell me if my baby is still alive. I think you could hear the concern in my voice and see it in my eyes as I cradled my bump, asking him, and he said, "I don't have the right probe, but I'll try." We ascertained what sounded like a heartbeat, and I went in for the angiogram. They determined that I had suffered a spontaneous coronary artery dissection, or SCAD. There was also nothing they could do for fear of making it worse. Kingston apparently is not a safe place for tourists, so I was loaded back into an ambulance to go back to the other side of the island where we had come from. That took us 7 hours. As I said, it took us 3 hours to get there, 7 hours back, because the wheel came off of the ambulance. And I'm not saying we had a flat tire, I'm saying that the wheel came off, rolled down the road off. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then I settled in for my second night. Once we got there, I settled in for my second night in a Jamaican ICU. My husband somehow, I don't know how, managed to arrange for me to be airlifted to Atrium Health, Wake Forest University Baptist Hospital, or Baptist as I'm going to call it later. They came and got me around noon with lights and sirens to the airport. I had spoken and said some tearful goodbyes with my parents, but as I was on the plane, I was not particularly hurting too terribly bad as I watched Montego Bay turn into beach and head out for open ocean as we went stateside. When all was said and done, I had suffered with heart attack pain for 78 hours in Jamaica. We landed on the tarmac, and I met my parents there and was loaded into a waiting ambulance. We went lights and sirens all the way to the hospital, into an elevator, and up to the 7th CICU floor, where I was quickly stripped down, given a sponge bath, a new gown, and had an IV started. 3 doctors appeared, and my husband had brought the angiogram disc from Jamaica with him, so 2 of them disappeared to see if there was a place they could play that, while 1 of them did an ultrasound of my heart. When he finished with the ultrasound of my heart, he said, "Would you like to see the baby?" 2 nurses appeared with giant grins on their faces. They wanted to see the baby too. That was actually the best picture of her in utero that we ever got. Let's see. The next day, Dr. Peters was the attending for the CICU floor from interventional cardiology. I will say that being a patient in the ICU, time stands still, so as to exactly when he arrived, I'm not sure. It seemed to be about 10 o'clock. He's a very nice man. I have to commend his humility. He's truly wonderful. He came in after a few, more business type meetings, but he came in and sat on the bed with his Yeti coffee cup that Saturday, and it didn't take him much, but you could tell he saw me as a person and understood the gravity of the situation I was facing. It didn't cost him anything to do that, but it meant the world to me and engendered a great deal of trust. Since I was a complex case, both being pregnant and all, I had lots of teams surrounded on me. Maternal fetal medicine, or MFM, came around on me, and they came one morning. Dr. Michi did. With me, how are you feeling? He said, we need to have a bit of a difficult conversation. I braced myself for what I thought was probably coming. That didn't make it any easier to hear. He said, your life is in danger. We recommend that you terminate your pregnancy. He gave me a moment to digest this, and I said, you're talking about a late-term abortion. He said, yes, I am. At that moment, my parents walked in, and I said, oh good, please tell them what you just told me. He said, we're talking about terminating a pregnancy, and my mother answered with a heart-like, no! Later that day, I was in my hospital room with my husband, and Dr. Peters came in to see us. He said, we're gonna have a meeting, and I need a decision about what you're gonna do by Sunday. Before he left, I said, what would you do? You could tell he didn't have an answer. I'd been told that the meeting was gonna happen at 10 o'clock the next day, and I had called my mother-in-law and my husband's cousin, who's an MP, to join us. And my father, having talked to all the teams, had said, you need to tell anesthesia about her now. And so they said they would make sure that they had included an anesthesiologist in their discussion. They all trooped in around 1:30, I know because I looked at the clock. And MFM was there, all of them. Interventional had sent a doctor, and heart failure had sent 2 of them, and then Dr. Rajkumar was there representing anesthesia and surgery. Dr. Milsky was operating. So he was not there. They did tell me that they had all had a discussion and that they were all going to respect my decision. It was my choice, what we were going to do. And that if any one of them tried to impose their will upon me, they would remove that person from my care team. Heart failure went first. They said, there are 4 pillars of heart failure medicine, and because you're pregnant, only one of those is available to us. Your life is in danger, and we would recommend that you terminate your pregnancy. I looked up at Dr. Michi and I said, I take it you wouldn't recommend I try this again. He said, no, I wouldn't. I've never felt so alone as that time in my life. I was in a room full of people, but I've never been that alone. I had a choice to make. And it was mine to make. It was my body that had to go through this. It was my life that was on the line. I'm not a quitter. I don't quit things. If we had quit things, we would have quit 3 years ago and gotten a dog. I will say this, I do not know, but in my heart of hearts, I knew. Call it faith, call it whatever you want. I knew for a fact that I was going to survive this. And that was the only thing that made this decision at all any easier. I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I knew for a fact that I could not live the operative word there being live with myself knowing that I had voluntarily terminated my daughter. As I came to this realization, there was still some talk of termination, and finally Dr. Michi put an end to it, and he said, if we're going to terminate this pregnancy, I'm going to be the one to do it. He left it unsaid, but it was clear to everyone in that room that if I did not want an abortion, he was not going to perform one. I'm very grateful to him for that. My father had visited me, and he had actually seen my next door neighbor had an Impella pump in as he waited for a transplant. And that gave my father an idea. And he had talked to the other team, so he had a good grasp of this plan. And he said, what about an Impella pump? Can you use that as a bridge to viability for her? And Dr. Rajkumar very bravely said, yes, we could absolutely do that. She clearly planned ahead for this. She talked to her colleagues at Duke, and they had said that. Apparently Dr. Milsky had also talked to his colleagues at UMass, and they had agreed that this is what they would do. Despite being told I was going to be released to go home by Christmas if they could, I was released 8 days later. I was able to have Thanksgiving at home and Christmas at my house in Virginia. We did our gender reveal at our face time with balloons. On the 27th of December, I wasn't feeling great, so my husband said, let's go back to your parents' house, let's go to the hospital just in case there was a problem. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning on December 28th with excruciating back pain. It might have even been worse than what I experienced in Jamaica. I made my way downstairs to where my parents, who were already up, were. They started to take my vitals when I said, I need to go to the hospital. They called the EMTs and they could drive from NASCAR. They got me to the hospital so fast. And they had clearly called ahead because it seemed as if the entire ER was waiting for me. As they waved us around the corner, people just kept coming to me in waves. They quickly did a chest x-ray, started a heparin drip, and I was in the cath lab in half an hour. They determined that I had suffered a continuation of the same dissection, and I spent a few nights in the ICU, but on New Year's Eve, I was in the step-down unit and about to go home. I toasted a lonely New Year's Eve and said, well, hopefully next year will be better. When the NP on call came and said that my lactate test was high and that I might need to have this baby tonight, I was at 25 weeks. I had spoken to the NICU team and they told me that my baby's chance of survival was probably about 65% chance if I had her now. I was moved back to the ICU and I was going into heart failure. I called my parents and my husband and they came to the hospital with me, and my father called Dr. Rashkumar. She actually canceled a family vacation to Washington, D.C. to come in and operate on me. Initially I was pretty panicked. I didn't want a pump in my heart. I was very afraid that if I went onto a pump I would never come off of it. But after the panic subsided, I realized that, these were the cards I was dealt. It was kind of inevitable. I needed to trust my physicians that they were good at what they did and keep the faith that had brought us to this point in my journey. That morning, we summoned a chaplain and prayed together as a family, and then I was taken to the cardiac OR. This seemed to be Dr. Rajkumar's show, and everybody was there. Dr. Milsky and his fellow were there, Adam, the Impella rep, was there, my obstetrician, Dr. Harris and her attending were there, 2 other people in green scrubs, who I think was interventional, and heart failure were there. There were 25 people in the room, I counted them. And that was not easy for my position on the table because it kept moving around. I was stripped down, painted orange, so it had a bad spray tan. We'd abandoned all modesty at this point. And as I lay there, it felt very important to me to tell anyone, that I did not want to die. I grabbed a passing nurse's arm and told her that. And then I put my hand on my stomach. And I felt her kick. In spite of everything, that made me smile. It was kind of like she was saying, you've got this. See you on the other side. Last thing I remember is everybody looking as one up at this board. It seemed to have steps that they needed to follow and a mask in place over my face. I will say that I do not remember waking up in the CICU, but obviously I did. I do remember trying to sit up for the first time. There was an excruciating pain in my groin that felt like an electric shock going through my body. That was apparently where Dr. Milsky had placed me on ECMO. Apparently I had crashed the moment they put me under. And he'd been given 5 to 10 minutes to get me back, or they were gonna have to take the baby. He was clearly successful since I was alive and still pregnant. After he'd gotten me stable, there was an anesthesia on my chest, and a lung bug tube was connected to another monitor, where he had placed the Impella pump in my heart. I saw heart failure in the NICU team every day for the next 15 days. I had a sneaking suspicion that not everything was going as well as it could, because the NICU team kept saying longer and longer. One day they sent somebody to sit and watch the monitor the entire night at my bedside. After about 15 days, they came to me and they said, you have done everything that you can for this baby, but we are having difficulty monitoring her effectively. And if one of you was to suddenly become unstable, we're gonna have to choose who lives and who dies. I realized later that they had been ready to do a bedside delivery since I'd arrived at the hospital. They told me that if they had to do a bedside delivery, I would probably die. But if they waited to try and get us to the OR, she would die. So the best thing for all concerned was to do a C-section. They scheduled my C-section for January 15th at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 10:07, January 15th, my daughter was born. She was 2 pounds, 4 ounces, and 15 inches long. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, the care and compassion that I received there is completely unmatched. When you have an impella pump, you are not supposed to leave the ICU, but I had just had a baby. So they were kind enough to bend the rules and let me go up there to the NICU and just see her. 3 days later, they took the impella pump